Hello and welcome to this Dungeon Fog video. Well, today we're talking about the interesting challenge I think that happens when one is dealing with a map maker like Dungeon Fog. And that is that sometimes we tend to leap into designing those amazing looking dungeons before we've given it any real thought. And what that can do is lead to some very static looking, very blocky, very square looking structures. And I know I myself am guilty of doing this, and that's why I thought we should discuss that today. Hello, my name is Guy and you're watching this Dungeon Fog video where we are looking at how to make your map seem more natural, more real. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at geography. Now, Dungeon Fog, as it loads up, as you can see behind me, normally starts up with a grid, and then if you're like me, you start plotting out all of your shapes based on the grid. And of course, that leads to a very grid-like structure. Now, we know not only from our own experiences here on planet Earth, but from most fantasy as well, buildings tend to follow the shape of the geography that they're built in, rather than to simply be these blocks that get plonked down Minecraft style on top of everything else. And part of the geography gives a very personal nature to each structure. Now, how do we do that in Dungeon Fog? Well, we're going to use a few little techniques within Dungeon Fog to do that, but they're going to help us tell our story in a much better way. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip on over down to our layers and levels, which you actually can't see behind me because I'm in the way. And with our layers and levels, I'm actually going to open this out so that you can see everything behind me. Let's just do all the way there, and I'm going to move the screen over. Now, layers and levels allows us, if we look at this space, we go to our, no, you still can't see it. Sorry, I didn't want to muck up the screen. Okay, there we go. If we go to our levels tab, you can see that we're currently working on this level. So I'm going to call this level geography. Great. Okay. Under geography, we can then come back. We can close our levels off now. We can come back here. And let me move this over again. I'm going to select this draw brush tool. I'm going to select it. I'm going to select a basic color as well. So I've selected green. You can see that is there. And then I'm going to come to my map and I'm going to say, right, we are going to have over here, we're going to have this is a hill. It's a hill. Okay, great stuff. We have a hill here, and I'm going to say that the hill is actually quite high. So we're working in a topographical kind of idea where each shade of green is a different layer. So the bottom layer is ground floor, second layer is second floor, third layer is top floor. And I think that's where we can stick at it. Now I'm going to go over to my color selector once again, and notice what I've done is I've chosen the color tab rather than the texture tab. So I'm not using texture, I'm using flat color. There's a reason for that. I'm now going to select blue. Doesn't matter what shade of blue really, that's all entirely up to us. I'm going to come back here, and now I'm going to say, all right, there is also a river which flows down here and off in that direction. Nothing major, nothing spectacular. Back to our color selector, back to green, because that's what we want. Thank you very much. And we're going to scroll down to here, and maybe there is, on this side of the river, there is another hill, which is actually this entire space. Okay, fantastic. And just over here is the top of the hill, which is our other space. Now I'm using a very small grid here, and it's a different kind of green, but that doesn't matter. That's not important. Okay, what I am going to do very quickly is I'm going to get rid of the grid so we can now see this a lot clearer. I hope anyway that you can see it clearer behind me. This is now our geography. We have now planned out a very rough kind of space. What I can now do is I go back. Let's just go back there to make sure you can see it. I go back to my layer, not GM notes. I go back to my layer tab. And now I click on this, which creates a layer above it. We now have a layer above it, and all of my geography has gone away. No, it hasn't, because it's still, let me get my head out of the way, showing the stage. I turn that off, and now I can see my geography below me. I'm now working on this, which I am going to call the actual structure ground floor. Okay, pressing enter each time to name it. I can now hide this level because I know I'm working on that structure level. We've got this slightly grayed out look here behind me. I can turn this grid back on again if I want to. I'm just going to make the grid a lot more subtle so it doesn't get in the way. Now, I can now go in and say, all right, fantastic. Let's build in a little tower here. But because the geography is now there, look at what happens. I now go, okay, so here is a 10-foot by 10-foot tower. I can't build here because it's a hill that rises up. So now what I have to do is I now have to run my wall to my next tower, let's say this way. So I've now got a wall in there, and I'll worry about my stacking later on. And then I can put a tower. Oh, I can't put the tower out into the river. So I can do this maybe. Maybe that's my tower. Then, once I'm finished designing this layer, I can then go once again back to my layer control. Let me move this over so you can see what I'm doing. Back to my levels. And I can now add another layer on top of that. Again, I'm going to hide my, get the head out of the way, hide that layer so I can see all of my geography underneath. And I'm going to call this the first floor. If I was in Japan, it would be the second floor. Because of the way that they name things versus the way that I've been raised to name things. It's an interesting cultural difference, isn't it? But now we can come in and we can say, great, now we're working on that floor. I'm going to hide that whole bar section again. I'm going to move this once again over here. I'm trying a new way of showing you things as well. And now I go, right, my tower is now 2 stories high. We're now on the second floor. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. I don't know what this structure is. There was no plan to this. This was just showing you how geography can be used to create interesting shapes. I can now build something on this section here, but I can't build something there. So what I could do is say, okay, so they're going to build a tower here. And that means that they're going to have to cut in underneath this hill. That's what they're going to have to do. And I now have a little archway, don't I? That now joins these 2 structures together. So you can walk underneath that. And we know of that because of the hill. But now what about, because now we're now on the same level. I should have had a tower downstairs as well, but I haven't. So this is an illegal structure. It's floating in the middle of nowhere. You're going to have to forgive me. Give me a little bit of leeway here. This tower now we know is on the same height as that one. So if it was just a standalone tower, it would just stick out on its own. What it does, though, is that it forces us to then say, okay, well, we could have the wall going to there. Yes, we're going to do that. And we want the wall to sort of retain its shape. And it's going to end up there, or is it going to end up there? We don't know. So they're going to have to be creative when they put this wall together, because it's going through some very strange distances and shapes and things. Again, though, what it's doing is it's forcing you to use the geography to create your structures. And you might want to say, well, I don't want to be forced. I don't want to have geography control how I operate. Yes and no. It creates a much more interesting map than if you had just plonked down some buildings. It allows you to then realize that, oh, we've got to go to the 3rd floor in order to get up on top of this hill. That's the power that adding geography to your maps does, is that it tells its own story. And it's a story that you need to follow if you want your map to make sense. But hasn't it already started to reveal some interesting things? Instead of just building a square tower, we've had to follow the course of the river. We would now have to work out as storytellers. If we go back, let's go back to this ground floor. If we go back to the ground floor and we don't see oh, what have I done? Oh, I've made another layer. If we go back to the ground floor, there should be a tower here, by the way. And we know that there should be a tower. If we create this tower here, we now have to think, how would we secure across this water? Would we build straight across? Do we need to build straight across? Would we build a wall that goes to there because you can still get around the tower? Let's say this is a gate post of some kind, and we build a wall to there. Arguably, someone can't swim through this river if it's very tough. We don't have to build a wall here because we can see that the tower extends that way. Now we can go, okay, great. So we're also going to do a similar sort of structure over here. And again, people won't be able to get past, they won't be able to get through. So it forces us to make some really interesting decisions, some really interesting shapes, and determine what is and was not feasible. And that's just through using the power of geography. I think it's a really great tool, and if you spend a lot of time developing your geography, you can create some very interesting features within Dungeon Fog that tell a map that is based on a real environment, that has real issues that they have to work around, that they have to look at and say, okay, well, our wall isn't straight because there's a hill in the way. We have to work around that hill. We can't just build as we want to. It makes for much more interesting maps, in my opinion, and it's something that you can do as easily as setting up a bunch of layers and then just working it out from there. Anyway, until next time, happy map making.